Welcome to Heart Over Gold, the channel where love, kindness, and humanity shine brighter than any fortune. In today's story, Michael Sterling, a powerful billionaire, thought his past with Eleanor Hayes was long behind him. But when he found her collapsed on the street, heavily pregnant and in pain, he realized the woman he once loved carried a secret that could change his life forever. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments, and keep up with our latest stories. Attention seekers of stories that touch the heart, prepare yourself for a tale filled with emotion and tension. If you enjoy it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. The city pulsed with late afternoon energy, traffic crawling while red brake lights painted the streets in a restless glow. Inside a polished black sports car sat Michael Sterling, a self-made tycoon in real estate. His fingers tapped anxiously against the steering wheel as his phone buzzed non-stop. Messages from clients, reminders from his assistant, and endless notifications demanding his attention. Michael glanced at his watch with a sigh. Another meeting, another deal, another chase against the clock. That was his existence now, always moving, never pausing. He rubbed his temples, trying to block out the blaring horns and impatient shouts from drivers around him. Just as he reached for his phone, his gaze shifted and froze. Across the street, a woman was struggling with grocery bags. One slipped, scattering fruit and cans across the sidewalk. She crouched down slowly, moving with effort, then winced, clutching her stomach. Michael's heart skipped a beat. The face was unmistakable. Eleanor Hayes. For a second, the noise of the city dulled, everything fading into the background. Months had passed since he'd last seen her, but the recognition was instant. Her energy had dimmed, her body softened by pregnancy, but it was undeniably her, the woman he had once promised everything to. Now, standing alone on a crowded street with groceries rolling away, Michael Sterling was admired by many, a relentless entrepreneur who had built an empire through sheer grit. To the world, he was the man who always won, the one who never slowed down. But beneath that polished exterior, his life was hollow. Nights ended in quiet drives to a massive, empty mansion. Dinners were cold meals eaten at a long table built for two but always set for one. The artwork, luxury, and high-end furniture only magnified the emptiness. Somewhere along the way, he had gained the world but lost something more valuable. And in moments of silence, when business wasn't screaming for his attention, his mind wandered back to her, to Eleanor, to the small apartment they once shared. Mismatched furniture, thin walls, and a fridge that was sometimes painfully bare. Yet back then, it had been enough, because they had each other. He remembered her unwavering faith in him. The nights she stayed awake helping him crunch numbers. The way she celebrated even his smallest victories. She had been his anchor, his cheerleader, the one who believed when he didn't. But as his career soared, their time together withered. Late nights at the office turned into endless excuses. Whispered apologies became empty promises. Eleanor's patience, though strong, could only stretch so far. Loneliness began to creep into her days and nights. The empty seat across from her at dinner, the cold side of the bed in the mornings, weekends swallowed by business trips and networking events. Eventually, the distance between them became too heavy to bear. One morning, she stood in their living room with her suitcase packed, her voice trembling as she told him she couldn't keep disappearing in the shadow of his ambitions. She still loved him, but love wasn't enough anymore. The sound of the door closing behind her had echoed in his chest ever since. And now, here she was, Eleanor, on a busy street, groceries scattered, clutching her belly as her knees gave way. Michael's body moved before his mind caught up. He pushed open his car door and rushed toward her. "Eleanor," he called, his voice breaking. She turned her head weakly, their eyes locking for a fleeting second, a moment heavy with years of history, recognition, and something else he couldn't name. Then she swayed again, collapsing forward. He caught her just in time, her body trembling and weightless in his arms. "Eleanor, it's me, it's Michael, stay with me." Her lips parted, a faint whisper escaping. "I'm fine." "No, you're not," he said firmly, though his voice cracked with panic. His hand brushed across her stomach, and the truth struck him. Pregnant, Eleanor was carrying a child. "Is it the baby?" he asked urgently. "Tell me what's wrong." Her hand pressed weakly against his sleeve. "Just tired," she breathed. Michael shook his head, refusing to accept it. "You fainted in the middle of the street." "This isn't just tired. We're going to the hospital." No arguments. Her hand slipped from his arm as her strength gave out. Without hesitation, he scooped her up, holding her tightly against him. "Stay with me, Eleanor, please. Just hold on." The chaos of the city blurred around him as he carried her toward his car, every step driven by fear, regret, and the sudden realization that he might lose the only person who had ever truly mattered. As he slid into the seat and started the engine, he cast a quick glance at her. Her eyes were closed, her hand still resting on her belly. She looked so vulnerable, so different from the Eleanor he had known. The woman who once stood by him with quiet strength and unwavering determination now looked barely able to stand. Michael gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white as he pulled into traffic. The drive to the hospital felt endless. Every red light stretched into an eternity. His mind raced with questions, a relentless storm of worry and guilt. What had happened to her? How had she ended up like this? And why hadn't he known? Why hadn't she told him? He looked at her again. His chest tightened as he watched her breathe. Each rise and fall of her chest, both a comfort and a reminder of how fragile she seemed. "Just hold on," he murmured to himself, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to her or himself. When they finally arrived at the hospital, Michael parked haphazardly near the entrance. Not caring about the stares he received, Ash leaped from the car. He opened her door and leaned in, his hand brushing her cheek. "Eleanor, we're here," he said softly. "Can you hear me?" With hesitation, he lifted her from the car, cradling her as he carried her through the hospital doors. The cool air inside hit him like a wave, but he noticed. Nurses turned to look at him, their expression shifting to concern at sight of the pale, unconscious woman in his arms. "She fainted," Michael said, his voice sharp with urgency. "She's pregnant. Please help her." The nurses sprang into action, guiding him towards a wheelchair. "Sat her here," one of them instructed. "We'll take it from here." Michael hesitated for a moment, reluctant to let her go, but then nodded and gently lowered Eleanor into the chair. She stirred slightly, her head falling to one side as the nurses wheeled her away. I should, Herr Bagan," but one of the nurses cut him off. "You can wait in the lobby, will it? You know, as soon as we can." Michael paced the small waiting room, his shoes making a soft click against the lint floor. His mind raced, a jumble of half-formed thoughts and unanswered questions. Every so often, he looked towards the double doors where Eleanor had disappeared, waiting, wishing for someone to come out and tell him she was. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, each one heavier than Thelist. Finally, a doctor emerged, his expression calm and serene, though Michael's heart still leaped. He stepped forward, his voice cracking slightly. Ash spoke. "How is she?" "The baby. She's stable," the doctor said, his tone reassuring. "The baby is also stable, but she is severely malnourished and exhausted. We're giving her fluids and monitoring her closely. She needs proper rest and nutrition going forward, but for now, she's doing okay." Michael exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Relief washed over him like he waved. "Thank you. Can I see her?" The doctor nodded. "She's resting now, but you can sit with her. Just try to keep things quiet. She needs rest more than anything." Michael followed the doctor down the corridor, his heart pounding with every step. When they reached the room, he hesitated at the doorway for a moment, his hand resting on the frame. Eleanor lay in the bed, her face pale but peaceful, her hands clasped over her stomach. She looked so small, so fragile, and it sent a pang of guilt through him. He entered silently, pulling a chair closer to the bed before sitting down. For a while, he simply watched her breathe. He wanted to say something, to reach out and touch her hand, but the words caught in his throat. As he sat there, the faint murmur of voices drifted from the hallway. He wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the words were impossible to ignore. "She doesn't have insurance that covers all of this," a nurse said softly. "Her bills are months overdue. I don't know how she's been managing. I heard she's been living in her car." Another voice responded. "Poor thing, and she's pregnant too. It's a miracle. She's here." Michael's stomach churned. Living in her car, overdue bills. He turned his gaze back to Eleanor, his chest tightening. How had things gotten so bad? How had she ended up here, alone, struggling and barely surviving? He clenched his jaw as he stood. Abruptly, the chair scraping softly against the floor. He moved closer to the bed, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "Elena, how did it come to this?" Michael asked, his voice low but thick with emotion. "Why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you tell me?" Her eyes slowly fluttered open, her gaze unfocused. Then she turned her head, her eyes fixed on the window. "Because I couldn't," she said softly. "Not to you, not to me," he repeated, stepping closer. "Elena, you're living in your car. You're pregnant, for goodness sake. Why didn't you say anything?" Her hand tightened lightly on her stomach, and she exhaled shakily. "Because I didn't think you'd care, Michael." Her voice tinged with something he couldn't quite identify. "Not after." Everything. Her words hit him harder than he expected. "Eleanor," his voice laden with guilt. "You know that's not true, do I?" she asked, turning her head to look at him. Her eyes were-tired, her expression unreadable. "You barely noticed me back then, Michael. Why would this be any different?" He opened his mouth to argue, but the words wouldn't come. She wasn't strong. He had failed her once, and the weight of that failure pressed down on him now, heavier than ever, Eleanor said, her gaze drifting to the ceiling. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she said softly. "After I left, I thought I could rebuild. I thought I could make a new life for myself." "What happened?" he asked softly, leaning closer. She was silent for a moment before speaking again. "I lent my savings to my cousin Sophia. She was supposed to pay me back, but then she lost her job, and then my job was cut and I couldn't keep up with rent. It tried to make it work, but she trailed off, shaking her head. One thing after another. Eventually, I just couldn't afford the apartment anymore. I ended up in my car. It broke down a few weeks ago. Michael looked at her, his chest tightening with every word. Why didn't you call me? He asked again, his voice quieter this time. Because I didn't want to, she said simply. Her eyes met his. I didn't want you to see me like this, Michael. But she shook her head, cutting him off. I've been surviving, Michael. Barely, but I've been doing it, and I didn't need you to show up to fix things. Not after everything. She had every right to feel that way. He leaned back in this chair, running a hand through his hair as he tried to process everything she had told him. For the first time in years, he saw the cracks in the life he had built, the place where he had failed. Not just her, but himself. I'm sorry for everything, she didn't respond. Her eyes closed again as exhaustion claimed her. Michael remained there, watching her breathe. And for the first time, he felt the full weight of what he had lost, of what he had let slip through his fingers. And for the first time, he realized how much he needed to fix it. A new chapter, revelations and redemption. This video, have you ever had to face the consequences of your past choices? Share your experiences in the comments. Over the next few days, Michael visited the hospital regularly to see Eleanor. She seemed better now. Her color had returned, and her movements were less. Still, the air between them remained thick. A silent tension neither had dared to break yet. A nurse bustled in, smiling warmly as she helped Eleanor adjust her gown for the ultrasound. Michael sat in the chair beside Eleanor, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, trying to appear calm, though he felt his chest would explode. Eleanor lay back on the examination table, her shirt pulled up just enough to reveal her rounded belly. The nurse applied a cold gel to her stomach, and the room filled with the rhythmic swoosh of the baby's heartbeat. Michael's breath hitched. At the sound it was so steady, so real. He couldn't stop staring at the monitor, the faint outline of the tiny life growing inside her. It was surreal, like something out of a dream. He didn't know what to say, so he remained silent, his eyes glued. Touchscreen. The doctor walked in, all smiles, and with a clipboard in hand. Ah, there's the little one, he said cheerfully, looking at the monitor. Looks healthy and right on track. Congratulations, Dad. Michael blinked. His heart stopped for a split second. What? The word came out louder than he intended, cutting through the soft rhythm of the room. He turned his head to Eleanor, his eyes wide. What did Hedges say? The doctor, oblivious to the sudden tension, chuckled lightly. I said, congratulations. You have a healthy baby in there. Michael turned back to Eleanor, his mind reeling. Looking at him, her gaze was fixed on the ceiling, her lips pressed into a thin line. Her silence was deafening, and in that moment he knew, Eleanor is the baby mine. Still, she said nothing, but her eyes flickered. A brief, involuntary movement that confirmed everything. Michael felt as if the floor had shifted beneath him. Thea in the room felt thinner, harder to breathe. His hands gripped the armrests. He tried to process what he had just learned. Why? Didn't you tell me? His voice was low, barely controlled. He didn't know if he was more hurt or angry. Perhaps both. Why didn't you think I had a right to know? Eleanor turned her head slightly, her expression wary, because it wouldn't have mattered. You barely noticed me back then, Michael. Why would this be any different? He winced at her words, as if the had struck a nerve he didn't even know he had. That's not fair, he said, shaking his head. You know that's not fair. It isn't, she retorted, her voice sharper now. She pushed herself up slightly, wincing as she adjusted her position. You weren't there, Michael. You weren't there when I needed you. When we were supposed to be building a life together, you were. Always too busy. Too busy for me. Too busy for anything that didn't revolve around your work. And now you think you can just show up and fix everything. Her words left him reeling, a storm of emotion swirling in his. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know how to make her see that he wasn't that man anymore. Or at least that he didn't want to be. I let you go because I thought it was what you needed. I thought I wasn't enough for you, but I see it now. I wasn't even there when you needed me most. And I'm sorry for that, Eleanor. I truly am. She looked at him, her expression softening slightly, though the tension in her shoulders didn't lessen. It's not that simple, Michael. This isn't about apologies. It's about responsibility, about showing up. And you can't just show up now and expect me to believe you've changed. I'm not asking you to believe anything, he said quickly. I'm asking for a chance to prove it. To prove that I want to be here for you, for the baby. Not out of obligation. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Eleanor looked at him for a long moment, her tired eyes shining with unshed tears as if searching his face for some shred of certainty, some proof that his words were real. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke, cracking under the weight of her vulnerability. I can't do this alone, she whispered, her shoulders slumping as if the admission itself was too heavy to bear. A raw plea born of exhaustion, fear, and the crushing loneliness that had followed her through every dark night in her car. You won't have to, he said immediately. I promise, Eleanor, whatever you need, I'll be there. I'm not going anywhere, she nodded faintly, almost imperceptibly. But it was enough. Okay, her voice dinged with exhaustion. Okay. Michael felt a strange mixture of relief and fierce determination. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. He felt like he had a chance to make things right, not just for Eleanor, but for the life they had created together. He wasn't going to let that slip away from him again, rebuilding together. Small gestures, big changes, share your thoughts. What was the most impactful turning point in their conversation? The following weeks were a whirlwind of changes, most of them initiated by Michael. He wasn't entirely sure where to start, but he knew he couldn't let Eleanor struggle alone. Not when he had the resources to make a difference, not when he was determined to be the man she and the baby needed. His first priority was to get her somewhere safe. He spent hours on the phone with real estate agents, insisting they find an apartment in a quiet neighborhood close to the hospital. When he finally showed Eleanor the place, her reaction took him by surprise. It's too much, Michael, she said, standing in the doorway of the sunlit living room, her hands resting on her belly. You don't have to do all of this. Yes, I do, Hest, moving closer to her. Eleanor, you need a comfortable place somewhere. This isn't me trying to fix everything overnight. I'm just trying to make things a little easier for you, for both of us. Her gaze lingered on him for a moment, and he could see the hesitation in her eyes. Finally, she nodded. Okay, she said almost grudgingly. Thank you. But Michael didn't stop there. He covered her medical bills without a second thought, ensuring she didn't have to worry about the mounting expenses that had been burdening her. And while the grand gestures mattered, it was the small ones that began to make a difference. It was an unmitigated disaster. He'd seen an online tutorial, convinced he could handle something simple like pasta. But somehow the sauce ended up burnt. The noodles stuck in a sticky clump, and the entire kitchen smelled of smoke. Eleanor stood in theaterway, watching him with an amused smile as he frantically waved a dish towel at the smoke detector. "You know," she said, stifling a laugh, "there's an amazing invention called takeout. You might want to look into it." Michael turned to her, his cheeks flushed, not just from the heat of the stove, but from the embarrassment of his failed attempt. "Was trying to do something nice," he mumbled, though the corners of his mouth curved into a reluctant smile. She stepped closer, shaking her head. "Well, I appreciate the effort," she said, taking the spoon from his hand. "But next time, perhaps, stick to salad." They bethlawed the sound, breaking the tension that had lingered between them for so long. He also made it a point to accompany her to every medical appointment, sitting by her side in the waiting room and asking questions during checkups. At first, Elena seemed surprised by his interest. Her eyebrows would lift slightly when he inquired about due dates and feeding schedules. But over time, her surprise softened into something else, perhaps gratitude or even trust. "You don't have to come toll of these, you know," she said one afternoon as they left the clinic. She had adjusted her coat, looking at him with a mix of curiosity and caution. "Most men would leave these things to the mothers." "I'm not most men," he replied, simply holding the door for her. "And besides, this isn't just about you. It's about us both figuring this out together." She didn't answer right away, but the faint smile on her lips told him enough. Their conversations grew easier, the silences between them less heavy. Michael found himself looking forward to their time together, even the mundane moments he started. Spending more time at her apartment, taking her grocery shopping, helping her organize baby things, and simply being there. Slowly but surely, the walls Eleanor had built around herself began to come down. One evening, as they sat on the sofa after dinner, take out this time, Michael looked at her, his heart heavy with something he couldn't name. She was folding tiny onesies, her hands moving with the kind of care that spoke volumes about the love she already felt for the baby. "Eleanor," he said softly, his voice breaking the comfortable silence. She looked up, her hands pausing mid. "Yes," she hesitated, her fingers tracing patterns on the edge of the coffee table. "I need to tell you something." Her brow furrowed slightly, and she set the onesie aside. "Okay," she said, her tone cautious. "What is it?" He took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I thought if I succeeded, if I built this life for us, it would make me worthy of you. I thought it would make everything better, but all it did was push you away." Elana's expression softened and she leaned back slightly, her arms resting in her lap. "Michael," she began, her voice trembling, "I never needed you to be perfect. I never needed the big house or fancy job or any of that." She blinked and he realized her eyes were shining with tears. "I just needed you to try," her voice cracking. "That's all Eva wanted." His chest tightened, the weight of her words settling over him like a blanket. "I am trying now." His voice barely a whisper. "I know it's late. Too late perhaps. But I'm here, Andiam, not going anywhere." She looked at him for a long moment, the silence stretching between them, and then slowly nodded. "I know," she said softly. It wasn't forgiveness. Not entirely, but it was a step forward. And for the first time in years, Michael felt like he was finally where he was supposed to be, and that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way forward together. A new dawn, the family always dreamed of. Subscribe for more stories of second chances. What was your favorite moment of Michael and Eleanor rebuilding their relationship? Comment below. The call came in the middle of the night. Michael had just fallen asleep when his phone vibrated on the nightstand, the sound sharp and insistent in the quiet. Drowsily, he grabbed it, squinting at the screen. Eleanor's name flashed, and his heart stopped for a second before leaping. "Alana," he answered, his voice tight with concern. "It's time," she said, her words rushed and shaky. "I think it's happening, Michael. I'm scared. Don't move," he said, already out of bed and pulling on his shoes. "I'm on my way. Just breathe. Okay, I'll be there in 10 minutes. The drive to her apartment felt like the longest 10 minutes of his life. Every red light, every slow car in front of him squeezed his chest with frustration. When he reached her building, his hands were trembling on the steering wheel. He found her sitting on the sofa, her face pale and glistening with sweat, one hand clutching her belly, the other gripping the armrest. "Michael," she said on a sharp exhale as he rushed to her side. "I think it's too early." "It's okay," he said, crouching beside her and taking her free hand. "We'll get through this. Come on, I'll get you to the hospital." He helped her to her feet, moving carefully but swiftly. She winced with each step, clutching his arm tightly as they made their way to the car. He settled her into the passenger seat, his hand remaining on her shoulder for a moment. "We got this," he said, though his own heart pounded in his chest. The hospital was a blur of hurried movements and hushed voices. Nurses and doctors guided them through the corridors to a delivery room, their instructions calm but urgent. Michael stayed by Eleanor's side, holding her hand as she gritted her teeth. With each contraction, her grip was like a vice, and he didn't care that it felt like she might break his fingers. "You're doing great," he whispered, pushing a damp strand of hair from her face. "Just a little longer," she shot him a look between breaths. "Don't say just a little longer, unless you are the one doing this." Michael couldn't help but chuckle, though his voice was tight with emotion. "Fair point," he said. "But you're still amazing." The hours passed in a haze of tension and exhaustion. Minutes stretched and blurred. And then finally, the sound that shattered Thessalon's, the first sharp, piercing cry of their daughter. Michael's breath edged as the nurse handed the tiny, trembling bundle to Eleanor. Eleanor's expression instantly softened. Eric's housegen vanished as she gazed down at the baby. Michael stared, his chest tightened as a wave of emotion washed over him. He hadn't expected to feel so much all at once. Joy, awe, a profound, overwhelming love that squeezed his throat and made his eyes sting. "She's perfect," Elena whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks as she gently touched the baby's tiny hand. Michael leaned closer, his own tears threatening to fall. "Yes, she really is." In that moment, everything else faded away. Their grays, the mistakes, the years of distance. All that mattered was the tiny life they had brought into the world and the unspoken promise to do better, to be better for her. The days that followed were a whirlwind of sleepless nights and steep learning curves. With the same determination he had once reserved for boardroom deals, he read every parenting book he could find. He asked the nurses a million questions and watched endless tutorials on caring for a newborn. The first time he tried to swaddle the baby was a disaster. The blanket ended up in an awkward bunch, and the baby squirmed free almost instantly. "Do they make it look so easy in the videos?" he mumbled, frowning as he tried again. Elena, sitting nearby with a cup of tea, burst out laughing. "You are overthinking it," she said, setting her cup down. "Here, let me show you." She guided his hands, showing him how to fold the blanket just right. When Theba B was finally snug in her swaddle, Michael grinned triumphantly. "Look, a that," he said, looking at Eleanor. "We make a good team. Don't get cocky, shittiest," though there was a warmth in her smile that hadn't been there in a long time. They found their rhythm, slowly navigating the chaos of new parenthood together. There were sleepless nights, filled with late-night feedings and diaper changes, quiet mornings where Eddie exchanged yawns and laughs over cold coffee, and afternoons spent watching their daughters sleep peacefully in her Moses basket. One night, as Michael rocked the baby to sleep after a particularly fussy spell, Eleanor appeared at the doorway. She leaned against the frame, arms crossed, a soft smile on her face. "You're good at this," she said softly. Michael looked up, surprised. "I'm trying," he said, his voice low so as not to wake the baby. "I still feel like I'm winging it half the time." "Welcome to parenthood," Eleanor said with Asmal's laugh, stepping into the room. She stood beside him, her gaze drifting tooth baby in his arms. "But seriously, Michael, you're doing a good job." The sincerity in her voice squeezed his chest. He looked at her, his expression soft. "Thank you," he said. "That means a lot." Over time, the barriers between them continued to erode. They began on taking walks in the park with the baby in her stroller, sharing quiet moments as they watched her giggle at the trees and passing dogs. They talked more about the baby, about their hopes, and Evanates about the things they had avoided for so long. One evening, as they sat together on the sofa, their daughter sleeping soundly in her crib, Michael turned to Eleanor. "You know," he began, his voice hesitant, "I never thought I'd get a second chance with you." With all of this, Eleanor looked at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she smiled softly. "You earned it," she said simply. "It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely, but it was a step forward." And as they sat there, the warm quiet of the moment settled over them. Michael realized that this messy, imperfect, but beautiful life was everything he had ever truly wanted. And this time, he wasn't going to let it slip away.